Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Future Seeds podcast. I'm your host, Cyprian, and in this show, I explore groundbreaking solutions to our world's unique problems by connecting seemingly unrelated fields such as technology, ecology, community, and spirituality. This is the second part of my interview with Jean Renouf. In this episode, we touched on different aspects of resiliency than the ones we discussed in episode 26. Jean explains why letting go of our ideas of normalcy is an essential principle of resiliency, how facing reality helps to find peace, and how we can, as humans, live together in a rapidly changing world. We also discuss different visions of the future, the power of storytelling, and the philosophy around responsibility, power, and wisdom.
Yes, so we're going to shift into that part of our interview, speaking about those solutions, which world we want to move towards, and what does Resilient Barn really do. Before we do that, I'd like your answer on how to deal with our fragile human mental health when it comes to facing something as drastic as the reality of ecological collapse.
That's a great question. And I think anyone who really understands what is at stake necessarily goes through a dark phase of, questioning one's life. No, I think a similar analogy would be, being in 1939 France and having German troops invading country and knowing all too well that your city is going to be conquered and invaded by the enemy. We are on this stage at the moment. We know it's coming. We can't see it, although we have hints of it, but it's coming. So it's very difficult because of our human brains are limited, our capacity to understand complex concepts. And climate change is an ultra complex concept. A super wicked problems, as some academics like to say. That we struggle to understand what to do, and there's a sense of paralysis. Personally, what we would like to offer at Resilient Barn is an alternative way of looking at what can be done. So while here in this conversation, I have spoken a lot about what is going wrong and what is coming at us. But what we do at Resilient Barn is we have accepted this already. We moved on from this. And I think, going back to your question about mental health, this is an essential first step, is letting go of any expectation you may have of life because of the society you grew up with. So the concept of success, the concept of what a job is, the concept of what the living a good life is in a Western country unaffected by unprecedented disasters are, all of this is the past. Let go of it. Don't envision the future of life through the prism of our parents' experience. The century is different, and you have to see it through new eyes. So accept it's happening as hard as it is, and it takes grief, it takes deep questioning, also spiritual crisis, but it's an essential component to face the reality. And once you face the reality, in a way, you found peace when you accept that this is the reality, you find peace. So even though all of those people going through these crises, the mental health crisis and anxiety, have to be supported through connection, through medical support, through non-medical support. There are plenty of ways of doing so. I think it's also, once you really deeply accept this is what's happening, whether we like it or not, you find peace and a new resolve, and it changes the way you see your life, what you want to do about your life, how we should live as a society, what does it mean to be Australian or French, for that matter, in such concept, in such a world. So, so I'm going to stop here. I hope I have answered your question about the mental health. Like it's a totally normal crisis is normal. Personal crisis is absolutely normal. I mean, so big. What we're going through is extraordinarily big, and we need support. We need to support each other. We need kindness. We need caring. We need to be seen through this. We need to normalize the fact that it's okay not to be okay. We need to accept that people will go through different phases of resistance, of anger, of rejection, of embracement, and that's all okay. And whether young or old, we will all go through this phase. Once we open up the eyes, we open our eyes to the reality. So it's about how do we support each other? How do we normalize the fact that it's big what's happening to us? Even COVID-19 just by itself is quite big, just to fathom,
It took a big toll
digest.
on people's mental health, for sure.
Exactly. And then the associated consequence, very tangible questions about we're going to leave if I lose my job, we're going to buy my food if there's no food. These are very practical, daily concerns that needs to be tackled in order for people to accept this reality and feel secure in it. So at Resilient Bayern, what we look at is a really system thinking approach to changing the way we live. We're not criticizing, we're not pointing finger at anyone. This is what it is. What we propose is a new way forward. Like, how can we together as members, different members of communities with different values, different worldviews, can still live together in this rapidly changing world in a way where we feel safe, in a way where we feel connected with oneself, with each other, with the environment. So we look at food security, we look at water security, we look at housing security, we also look at energy security, we look at emergency and crisis, we look at health and mental health and well-being. There are other areas we want to look into, but we're just not there yet. We also encourage support and provide assistance for residents in the Shire and Northern Rivers to come together in their streets, in their neighborhoods, in their valleys, in their shorelines, in the area where they live, in order to reconnect, to recreate this village feel in a way where they can know each other, where they can support each other, and where together, as they build trust and confidence in each other, and they don't have to be best friends, but just understanding that we're better off all together if we're a bit closer, we rethink the street, we rethink the neighborhood, we rethink the valley or the shoreline. What does it mean to be actually living here beyond my acre or half acre, whatever that is, So we propose a new narrative basically and provide tools on how to get there.
Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how Resilient Bayern is structured? I know you have a few different subgroups.
Yes, absolutely. So basically there are 4 components to Resilient Bayern. The first one is all of our projects around the neighborhood groups. So we have a team of volunteers who basically lead the effort in ensuring people are encouraged, supported, and nurtured in getting closer with the neighbors. So getting closer to the neighbors has different levels. It can be, at the very minimum, knowing each other, knowing their names, have a sense of who they are, at the very minimum. And this is a big ask in many places in the world, including in this region. So at the very minimum, know who your neighbor are. Second best is, once you know each other, perhaps establish some sort of relations, and perhaps at some point you can come together. And as a street, as a neighborhood, you can start asking yourselves, kind of reflect on how you were hit in your neighborhood by COVID, by the bushfires, or the flood, by the heat wave, the droughts, whatever. And you can have those conversations together. And you can identify areas of strength and opportunities in your neighborhood. So then suddenly you realize that, you're a doctor. I didn't know that. I'm a mechanic. Maybe we can help each other out. Or I'm a teacher. Maybe I can train people in resilience. Or I'm a babysitter. I'm quite happy actually to take everyone's kids for an afternoon while the mothers and the fathers are being trained in resilience. So we find all these strengths and opportunities. We assess the risks specific to the place where we live and find the resources and also get support from outside in order to build our resilience to those future disasters or crises that we have identified. And the third best is, once you have really established a solid relationship, solid relationships and basis of trust among what used to be strangers, then you can really reconceptualize what does it mean to live together in a street, on a neighborhood. So if you look at, water cycle or energy cycle, where's our energy coming from? Where does it go? Who is paying what? How many water do we have? How many Where do we get our food from? Can we rationalize a bit all of this instead of all of us having different answers and living in an individualistic way? Instead of having 15 sheds in 15 gardens in a peri-urban area, why not having one central shed and one more for 15 households instead of 15 mowers? Why not having a community gardens among those 15 houses, which serve the needs of all those 15 houses?
It reminds me, people always try to build eco-villages, which is also referred sometimes as intentional communities. I remember seeing this woman go on a rant that she didn't want to see intentional communities. She wanted to see accidental communities. She wanted to see communities being built where houses already existed.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think starting where we are is a very good place to start. Because it's real. We don't have to fantasize about what would great community look like. There's no perfect community, and every community has challenges and struggles because this is who we are as humans. But once you accept this is our nature. It's our frailty. It's also our beauty. We kind of let go of trying to control it and kind of accept the ebbs and flow of living together. And then we find new opportunities. And in a way, when we relax, we connect, we open up to deeper experiences in between people, but so inside. Like personally, when we created our neighborhood group, I felt a sense of connection with neighbors, even those I hadn't spoken to. Suddenly, I just did not see them just as people living there, whom I didn't really particularly care. But suddenly, I had an inner shift. I really saw them as they're really humans. They really are just like me. And suddenly I had this curiosity, who are they? And I had this sympathy, even this kind of gentle curiosity to know, I want to know more about these people who just live there, just happen to live there, So I think some sort of barriers fall down as trust is being established and as a mental shift or mental focus shifts. So this is how you regenerate a community. And in process of regenerating that community, you build the resilience to those disasters we mentioned before. So that's one aspect of Resilient Bayern. We support people creating those neighborhood groups. The second aspect is we bring together residents around a common theme because they have an expertise, a passion around this. So food security, water security, housing security, mental health and well-being, energy security, and emergency and disasters. So all of these areas have volunteers who basically identify who's doing what where in the region on these specific themes, what's working which deserves further support, and where are the gaps that we need to fill or find partners to fill in order for us, all of us, becoming more resilient and regenerative. These themes, these experts in the field also support the neighborhood groups building the resilience, so that if a neighborhood living up in the hills that were threatened by bushfires come up with some ideas about how to protect themselves against future bushfires, they can ask those experts in emergency and disaster management some feedback on their ideas or advice on how best to manage those risks. So there's a crossover between those areas. Then the third component is partnerships. So we don't aim to be an umbrella organization. We don't aim to replace anyone. We're very happy to work with whatever already exists and support existing organizations. I mean, the community is extraordinarily rich in terms of community engagement in the region. There's a huge amount of kindness happening every day, invisible and visible, that is very well worth supporting. And if we just even made visible what already happened, everybody would feel better because we would have a sense of, we're actually pretty good in this region. Instead of emphasizing what doesn't work, we would actually be impressed by what we do. So we partner with existing organizations. We want to support them in what they're doing, especially if their work leads to resilience and regeneration. And if there are gaps to be filled, then we're not necessarily the best place to fill these gaps. So we see who is willing or able to fill these gaps and how can we support each other. So it's more about creating a movement rather than some sort of hierarchical umbrella organization. And the idea is that all of us somehow in our daily life feel those invisible threads that connect us all becoming more visible. Suddenly we feel this connection, we kind of sense it. We feel calmer and more at peace and more secure, because we know there's this safety net, which is called the community. And finally, last part is acknowledging that all of this takes time and effort and resources. We also want to ensure there is funding for this. So we are not competent to manage, we're not a bank. We don't want to be a bank. So we are partnering existing organizations for them to create resilience and regeneration funds that they manage to provide this funding to the community.
That's amazing. That's a lot of different things. It's very diverse.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely, yeah. And that ties into your earlier question about why I'm always tired.
Absolutely.
At the very beginning.
Well, I said it was the symptom of a hardworking man, but it's definitely a symptom of a dad. For sure.
Yeah, nice.
How long has it existed for?
A year and a half. So that basically we put it together before the bushfires. We sensed that something was coming. We didn't anticipate the bushfires. We did not anticipate COVID-19. We just knew that the situation would worsen. And we got, like everyone, caught by surprise how early. But yeah.
And how many people turn up? How many people are involved?
So I would say the core team is made of, let me think out loud here. The core active members and leaders at the position of leaderships are around 20.
All volunteers.
Yeah, all volunteers. Then there's another probably 15 to 20 who kind of help around, or, here and there. And then there's a community of several hundreds of people because they're part of neighborhood groups or because they're part of the online groups that are in the system, basically, and, contributes here and there. And sometimes offer their own stuff. Like there's someone who doesn't have a direct relation with Resilient Bayern, just as part of one neighborhood supergroup who decided he had some skills, and he decided to offer a free workshop 2 days long on building these skills, and he has done so. So there are new initiatives emerging from this just because people realize that that's the way to go, basically.
About the food security subgroup, you've been linking with all the local farmers.
Well, we're in the process of, rather.
Yeah. How are they reacting to that?
I think the food security leaders, team leaders, would be in better position to answer this question because they are doing the work. But from what I gather, from what they're telling me, is very positively. I think there's a real understanding of what's happening. And we approached it in a non-discriminatory way. So, of course, we would encourage and promote regenerative practices to agriculture, but we are open to reality, to what exists without judgment. We just take the world as it is and we work with what is.
And they're happy to be part of such a network.
I don't see it as being happy of part of network. It's just like, it just makes sense. It just is normal to kind of develop relationships with people who are constructive and wanting to support what you're doing. It just happens naturally, without conceptualizing that you're engaging in a network, if that makes sense.
I would totally agree. I'm sometimes surprised by the reaction of some farmers, old school practitioners of any kinds, actually.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. And some are very well grounded, understand very well. We don't have to talk about climate change. This can be a politically contentious issue, but if we talk about the droughts, everybody agrees on that.
So that works. Droughts work.
Yeah, droughts, floods. Yeah, we can talk about that, definitely.
It seems to me that what you're doing with Resilient Bayern, a part of it is a transition to something that's now been coined regenerative economy. There's a big spectrum of how people on the planet envision the future. There's two extremes, which are on one side, the very technocratic society and putting all in on electrical cars, carbon sequestering and satellites. And there's all that side of things. And on the other side, there's the other extreme, which is almost going back to tribal societies. And there are new concepts that are rising. Regenerative economy is one of them. Circular economy is one of them, etc. What's your take on transitioning from the world we're in to wherever we decide to go with all the difficulty of actually getting people to agree on a vision of the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's the $1 billion question. To me, it's a mix of two things. It's inspiration and incentives. Inspiration is there's no point of blaming people for believing what they believe. There's no point of, as I see it, at pointing at someone's responsibility when we can just move on. So to me, it's inspiring, proposing and building, as we do at Resilient Bayern, building a different future, a different society. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to convince people. It naturally flows. Every single person I spoke to about Resilient Bayern kind of get on board because it just makes sense. So there's no need of convincing anyone. It's just, this is what we do. Do you want to be part of it? Yeah, you're very welcome. So it's proposing an alternative which inspires people to be part of it because it just makes sense. And the second one is the incentive. Some people will not join in for multiple reasons because they don't have the time, because they don't have the knowledge, because they don't have their resources, because they have different viewpoints of what should be done, etc., etc., or different ideology that drives them to a different direction, etc., etc. That's all fair enough. And without judgment, it's about incentivizing those people to join. And so it's not forcing. It's still part of the inspiration. Is like, what if I told you that if, let's say, coming back to this concept of neighborhood, we thought and built our neighborhoods differently, you would be happier and your kids would be happier. You would feel safer in allowing your kids to play in the street. Would you want to be part of that? What if I told you that, we could grow food in a way which does not deplete the quality of the soil in your farm, but enriches it and provides diversity of income? Do you want to be part of that? So we incentivize. What if we with your agreement and support and implication, we had a network of swales and natural dams interconnected one with each other that would ensure not only the region's water security, but your personal water security? Would you want to be part of that? So it's so difficult to say no when there's such a tangible incentive.
The storytelling part of it.
Exactly. And you don't have to convince anyone about that's a right or wrong way. It's just, this is how it improves your life. Do you want to be part of it?
I'd say yes.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think we really have this longing in Western society. Our lives are so fragmented, so disconnected from each other, from the meaning, the real deeper meaning of life, from nature. We have this longing of reconnection, of depth. And this is, in a way, what we offer is this reconnection, this reconceptualizing of what does it mean to live in a century of climate change, knowing that it's happening. What does it mean about living a good life? So, it brings back to the 4 essential concepts such as caring for each other, like genuinely caring for each other, true compassion, a sense of I'm kind of concerned about how my neighbor's situation is. And if I don't know them well, I kind of want to do something for them. But I also know they would do the same for me. So what if also we grew up, and I don't know if that is possible, but what if we grew with this kind of satisfaction that we've turned the tide and our children and grandchildren will be able to scuba dive in the Great Barrier Reef? Instead of thinking, as we do at the moment, it's fucked. It's going to be bleached in coming years and 100% of it will be killed in this century. This is the largest organism on Earth, living organism on Earth. What if we could change the way we live together so that, of course, our children and grandchildren and their children are going to be able to scuba dive in the Great Barrier Reef and be amazed by its beauties and wonders? Of course. So I think what we'd like to do is really focus our energy to this world we want to live in. We understand the reality of what has happened, what's coming to us, and we have to face it. but in the process, it's not falling into despair or unconstructive negativity or pessimism, even if all those behaviors are absolutely understandable, but promote a different way of living, which is not idealistic, which is just, well, we have the choice whether we let it happen or not. And if we don't know where we want to be, we provide, a more engaging way of life and hope again, and a sense of reconnection with what life is, with what being alive means, with oneself, who you are, what is the meaning of your personal life, what are you here for, and what does a sense of deeper achievement means to you, and how does that affect your family and your community, and so really reconceptualizing deeply life through the way we already are. That makes sense.
Absolutely. That was inspiring. And
Great.
I usually ask at the end of interview the speaker to give an inspiring message and to address themselves to listeners. But now I feel bad because you just did that. But still, I'm going to ask you. This is the end of the interview.
Go ahead.
Actually, before I ask you, there's one more question that's more philosophical that I want to ask you. We spoke about a word, the Anthropocene, and how we as humans deeply affect the planet, so much that we had to name an era of time after us. It seems that despite ourselves, we have a lot of power. There's a part of that we want, that we're very proud of. This part of it we don't want to realize. We refute our impact on the world. There's a great philosopher that we well know in France, Rabelais, which said science without consciousness is just ruin of the soul. And we have extended our power mostly through technological advancement way beyond our wisdom. We have not progressed at the same speed.
Nicely put, yeah.
And now it seems that we've come to a point where we've overused our power without wisdom. And we kind of have to increase our consciousness of how we're all interrelated, how we're a part of the planet, how we're connected to creatures, how everything is connected with everything. How do we link a greater and wise sense of responsibility with the recognition that we have power, and that power has to come with responsibility? One word I've heard more in the recent years is that the role of the human being is stewardship of the planet. I like this word. I've discovered it here in Australia, especially through listening to the indigenous people, because that's how they saw their role. But it's something I've never heard in our Western white world. We don't have that notion that we're there to steward the planet, to help all living creatures. And you being a lecturer and working in Resilient Bayern, what's your idea of having that notion, or another one that's similar, but linking the recognition that as a species we're powerful, and the fact that that comes with great responsibility and the need for wisdom?
I mean, I think we all have this wisdom, and it's more about creating a space for this wisdom to arise. I think the way we live at the moment, everything from the pressure from paying a mortgage to social media incessant addictions to the need to be a perfect worker, perfect husband, perfect at physical exercise, perfect at philosophy, like the sheer amount of pressure that all of us, men and women, boys and girls, go through is absolutely insane. And what we ask from each of us is new in the scheme of things when you look back at how societies organize themselves. So what I think we need, and I speak for myself here too, is a sense of space. And I feel that also inspired by the teaching of Catherine Ingram, who is a Dharma teacher living in our region, I would say that creating space for things to arise will naturally guide us to where we should be. So it's not easy for a single mom raising 2 kids and having to navigate 2 jobs to pay the rent. That is probably difficult, if not impossible, in that particular stage of her life. But I think if, as a society, we could, let go of the glorification of being busy and the glorification of wealth, material wealth, as a notion of success, and focus more on the depth that each of us can go in simply if we allowed it to be. So we run away from that depth through, as I said, social media or drugs or any sort of addictions, alcohol. We constantly run away from it. It's always coming back, trying to capture our attention, and we run away from it. So what if we simply allowed it to be? I think wisdom would would naturally be wise then. As for your comment about technologies, I agree we spoke essentially about climate change here and a crisis, but really I think the 2 defining components of the 21st century will be climate change and artificial intelligence. I mean, there's all sorts of new technologies also, but really artificial intelligence will be the 2 overarching, elements of the century, and will the way we respond to these will define where we are in the next century. But already we are very seriously, and very competent, very intelligent people very seriously talking about the concept of post-human. And so soon, the concept of Anthropocene, and the concept of Anthropocene will be outdated in a way, if we are in this century able to connect ourselves to networks, to the Internet of Things, and expand our human capacities, both physical, mental, we really transform who we are as a species. And if in parallel we also change our genes, what does that mean in 2, 3, 4, 5 generations down if we have survived all this? Can we reproduce with each other? Perhaps not. So the concept of post-human is quite blatantly revolutionary. It's like we are here contemplating through our making potentially the creation of a new species, which will diverge from the existing one, to which natural evolution will continue to affect. So these are tremendous, questions which have very serious ethical implications. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that we definitely don't have the wisdom to tackle these. But luckily, there are a few people who realize this and are working very hard on providing some elements of answers. But yes, I agree. There should definitely be looked further into.
Thanks for that. And now I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and imagine you're speaking directly to the listeners, and send a message that lasts for just a minute or so, something that's dear to your heart, something that reaches you, that you would like everyone to know about resilience, about your work.
Well, I think it boils down to 3 things, really. All of us, and it's both an individual and collective effort. And it's not just of us, it's also corporations, also governments at all levels. But all of us, I think, have a responsibility to question what we do and how we live our lives in 3 aspects. The first one is in terms of impact on the planet, and in particular, but not limited to, carbon emissions. How much carbon emissions do we each provide, and what does it mean for our children if we continue living this way? The second one is, how prepared are we to what has started and what's coming? what changes do we have to make in our life to be more prepared to this? And the third aspect is, in light of these, instead of just making some significant, insignificant efforts, just as changing bulbs and stuff, how do we radically engage in living in different society? This need to reconceptualize all of us, our values, our life expectations, and be creative in living in a way which allows us to have a future. So yeah, reduce emissions, adapt, and transform.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And everyone, if you want to check out Jean's work, you can find it on www.resilientbyron.org and on Jean's LinkedIn page. That is Jean Renouf, JeanRenouf. That's correct, Jean?
Yeah, correct. Thanks.
Cool. Speak soon.
Yeah, thank you, Cyprien.
I hope you enjoyed episodes 26 and 27 on the topic of socio-ecological resilience. In the next episode, I'll be interviewing Phil Preston. Phil left a corporate career in 2007 where he was overseeing billions of dollars in investments to help businesses go beyond token and symbolic acts of charity to really making a difference. Together, we'll be exchanging on the topic of committing business to purpose and why philanthropy is for dinosaurs. Don't forget to subscribe to the Future Seeds podcast on your favorite app or through our newsletter on www.futureseeds.news to get notified of new episodes.